I never thought I would come to this. One morning, I walked into the lab, coffee in hand, ready to run the final simulations on a project I had spent 5 years perfecting, and I saw it. My name had disappeared. Not in the usual, oh, someone forgot to update the report way. My name was gone from the patent listing. In its place, like a jagged scar across everything I'd built, was hers, Victoria Hargrove. Vicky, the CEO's daughter, a woman whose idea of R&D was sitting in a corner office flipping through glossy reports, occasionally asking me to make it sound more innovative. I stared at the screen. $1.8 billion patent. My work, my sleepless nights, my innovations in AI-driven bioinformatics integrated with quantum computing, the breakthroughs that could revolutionize medicine and data security, all hers now, at least on paper. The weekly patent report had arrived in my inbox. I clicked it, hoping it was a glitch. It wasn't. Lead inventor, V. Hargrove. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling tiles, feeling the room close in. I thought back to the countless nights I had meticulously documented every step, every line of code, every test run. Every single piece of evidence proving my ownership was buried in the metadata of the submission files, time-stamped, version-controlled, untouchable. I called my project manager, Jenna. Her voice trembled when she answered. I double-checked the database, I said, trying to keep my calm. These contributions are mine, not hers. She says it's part of a new recognition policy from corporate, Jenna stammered. Recognition policy? I laughed bitterly. Do you know what this is? It's theft. It was small at first, almost laughable. I tried to tell myself it was just corporate bureaucracy, but when Vicky strutted into the next board meeting presenting my patent like a trophy, the humiliation went from subtle to seismic. The boardroom was packed, investors staring at her slides filled with colorful diagrams and graphs. My research, my code, my years of innovation. She presented it all with a smirk, saying, I'm thrilled to lead this breakthrough. Credit goes to our strategic vision team. I received the follow-up email later that day from the legal department. Short, cold. Per CEO directive, patent credit now reflects Victoria Hargrove as lead inventor. I remember sitting at my desk, staring at the screen, fists clenched. This is fraud, I whispered, my voice barely audible over the hum of the servers. They couldn't comment further. The legal team had been neutered by her father's influence. But I knew the truth. The digital signatures, the time-stamped metadata, the server logs showing the off-hours edits, all of it would prove what she had done. But I didn't act immediately. That would be the mistake. The first real shock came a week later. I was summoned to HR. Vicky was already there, leaning back in the leather chair as if this were her living room. Your position has been terminated effective immediately, she said, sliding a thick folder across the polished mahogany table. Please sign this NDA acknowledging company ownership of all inventions. I picked up the pen but didn't sign. Instead, I studied the fine print. The NDA was clever, legal enough that most people would panic and sign, but it couldn't override the company's own internal policies, specifically the clause on page 42 of the employee handbook. All intellectual property developed on company time is property of the inventor unless explicit reassignment occurs. Vicky had no such reassignment, not legally, not in writing. She had the CEO's verbal blessing, but that didn't count. Not here, not in this office, not under federal law. I leaned back, pen hovering over the page. So that's how far you'll go, I thought. I hope you've read the fine print. For the next 3 days, I barely slept. My mind replayed every interaction with her, the small edits she made in the database, the minor corrections she'd suggested in project meetings, the subtle way she tried to insert herself into investor calls. Each act, minor on its own, now painted a picture of a ruthless, entitled strategy to steal credit. And then it hit me. Patience, precision, knowledge of the rules. If I wanted justice, I couldn't act out of anger. I had to weaponize the bureaucracy she thought she controlled. I began collecting evidence. Every off-hours login, every altered metadata entry, every internal memo she tried to manipulate. Each file, each timestamp, each tiny detail was a breadcrumb trail. I knew the compliance board couldn't ignore it. But this wasn't enough. I needed leverage, something that would not just expose her, but also protect me legally. That's when I remembered the company policy. dual confirmation required for any patent reassignment. The inventor and the R&D director both had to sign. Vicky had neither. I started drafting my formal acceptance of reassignment, but with an amendment. In this amendment, I stipulated that any profit distribution, royalties, and legal rights must remain with me, the original inventor. It was subtle, almost invisible to an untrained eye, but legally airtight. At the same time, I quietly forwarded copies of the server logs and metadata to the corporate compliance board and my external IP lawyers. Every off-hours login, every edit attempt, every misrepresentation by Vicky would be on record. Every morning, I sat at my desk, sipping my coffee, watching the office hum around me. The hum of the servers, the clack of keyboards, the faint scent of electronics and sterilized lab air, it all became my focus. Micro-tensions, tiny details that no one noticed, the exact font Vicky used to forge for updates, the precise layout of the server directories she couldn't resist touching, the subtle changes in document version numbers. Each was a note in the symphony of my plan. I couldn't rush it. I couldn't slip. One wrong move, one premature confrontation, and I'd be out for good. My patent gone, my career in ruins. But the longer I waited, the more the pieces fell into place. And then the moment came. The boardroom, filled with investors and senior management, Vicky at the head of the table beaming with misplaced pride. I walked in behind the compliance team and legal counsel, carrying every piece of evidence I had compiled. The screen behind me flickered on. Server logs, internal memos, and the time-stamped metadata proving my sole authorship. The room went silent. Vicky's smile faltered. Her eyes darted to the screens, then to the counsel at her side. "Miss Hargrove," the corporate counsel said, voice steady, "you were never legally assigned this patent. Attempting to reassign it without the inventor's consent is a violation of both company policy and federal law." Her face drained of color. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came. The hum of the air conditioning suddenly felt deafening. I sat down, finally letting myself exhale. Precision, patience, knowledge of the rules. That's what won. Not anger, not screaming, not threats. The fallout was immediate. Vicky was demoted, put under strict monitoring, and publicly reprimanded. The CEO had to acknowledge my legal ownership of the patent. My position was reinstated, full credit and royalties intact. The board launched a review of nepotism hires and internal compliance policies. Sitting back at my desk, I stared at the glow of the monitor. Justice, it turns out, is often quieter than revenge. It doesn't need fireworks or drama. It only needs the right leverage at the right time. And me? I finally felt the weight lift. Years of hard work, sleepless nights, and meticulous care had not been stolen. They were mine. And anyone who thought they could take it learned a very important lesson. Never underestimate someone who knows the rules and how to use them. Have you ever had a boss or colleague try to claim credit for your work? Let me know in the comments. I want to hear your stories. And if you want more tales of justice served in the corporate world, subscribe for more. After the boardroom's showdown, I didn't immediately return to normal. There was still work to do. The patent was mine, yes, but Vicky's influence lingered like a shadow over the department. Every glance she threw across the lab reminded me she was still dangerous. Not physically, but politically. One misstep and she could make life miserable again. So I started documenting again. Not just her attempts to steal credit, but the subtle ways she undermined teams, the precise ways she edited the quarterly reports to inflate her contribution, the exact sequence of approvals she tried to fast-track to create a paper trail of ownership. Micro-tensions, tiny, invisible to everyone else, but deadly in court or compliance hearings. I kept a mental map of her daily routine. 8:03 a.m., entry into the building, badge swipe log captured. 9:15 a.m., first coffee in the executive lounge. 10:42 a.m., edits to patent database. Metadata clearly showed these were unauthorized changes. 1:23 p.m., meeting with project leads, attempted to take credit verbally for my algorithm optimization. 5:59 p.m., last badge swipe. Each of these tiny details became a piece of the larger puzzle. One morning, Jenna, my project manager, approached me cautiously. I heard the compliance board might do a formal review. Are you okay with that? She whispered. I smiled, though there was no warmth in it. Absolutely. They'll see exactly what I've been documenting for months. She hesitated, then nodded. I've never seen anyone work like this. You're scary, methodical. Methodical is what keeps you out of jail in this business, I replied, eyes scanning the server logs displayed on my screen. Each line of code, each timestamp, every off-hours login attempt, Vicky had no idea I had a full dossier ready. I spent nights at the lab, long after everyone else had left. The hum of the servers became my lullaby, the blinking LEDs my companions. I traced every document she touched, every system she tried to manipulate. One subtle trick she often used, she would resave documents with slightly altered file names, hoping no one would notice that she was inserting herself into my work. I noticed. I archived both versions. Each subtle manipulation became a nail in the coffin of my plan. Then came the email that should have made me panic, but didn't. From HR, to Senior Research Team, subject, temporary reassignment of project oversight. Effective immediately, Miss Victoria Hargrove will be overseeing the Quantum Bioinformatics Integration Project. All leads must report to her. The phrasing was calculated to intimidate. I read it slowly, line by line, and then I smiled, because I had already submitted my formal acceptance of reassignment with my amendment. Any attempt to claim profit, royalties, or credit without my consent would trigger compliance and legal review. Vicky, of course, had no idea. She thought she had won, and I let her. That was part of the plan. Patience, silence, observation. The next escalation was subtle, but delicious. During a meeting with the investor relations team, Vicky tried to take credit again. She began confidently. Thanks to my leadership, we've achieved... I didn't interrupt. I simply pulled up the compliance amendment on the projector screen, line by line. Investors leaned forward. She froze, mid-sentence, realizing the legal safeguards she had ignored. Miss Hargrove, I said calmly, as per company policy and documented internal approval, I am the sole inventor of this patent. Any reassignment without dual consent is invalid. Compliance has been notified. Her cheeks flushed. She attempted a response, but the compliance officer beside me gently raised a hand. Silence. After that, the internal compliance review began in earnest. They scrutinized every email, every server log, every document version. My micro-tension details became the evidence that ensured Vicky's misdeeds couldn't be overlooked. I remember the exact moment she realized she was doomed. It was a Thursday afternoon. She stormed into the lab, cornered me near my workstation. How did you get all of this? Her voice wavered between anger and panic. I didn't look up from my screen. I simply tapped a few keys, bringing up the side-by-side comparison of her edits versus the original metadata. Every off-hours login, every document edit, every attempt to alter credit. I logged it all, step by step, legally. She paled, and that was when I felt it. The thrill, not of revenge, but of justice served. Because I hadn't cheated, I hadn't lied. I played by the rules, and the rules were stronger than her arrogance. By the end of that week, the board meeting had been scheduled. The CEO's office was buzzing with tension. Vicky walked in, expecting congratulations, nods of approval, and pats on the back. Instead, I entered with the compliance team and legal counsel, each carrying printed logs, server metadata, and time-stamped evidence. The projector lit up. Investors murmured, leaning forward to inspect the documents. Vicky's eyes widened, her confident mask slipping. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. The counsel spoke first. Miss Hargrove, you were never legally assigned the patent. Attempting to reassign it without the inventor's consent is a violation of both company policy and federal law. Silence. The hum of the air conditioning, once unnoticed, now seemed deafening. Investors shifted in their seats, eyes darting between the two of us. The CEO's face went pale. And then the floodgates opened. Compliance formally demoted Vicky, placed her under strict monitoring, and required a public acknowledgement of her wrongdoing. The CEO had to admit, reluctantly but officially, that I was the rightful inventor. My patent, my credit, my royalties were fully restored.
Even after the boardroom showdown, the lab felt tense. Vicky wasn't gone entirely. She remained in the building, demoted but still hovering, a shadow in the corridors. I watched her from my workstation, noting the small things, the way she avoided eye contact, the faint tremor in her hands as she passed the security scanners, the subtle hesitation before speaking in meetings. Each little movement was a sign she knew her power had evaporated. But I didn't relax. I had learned the hard way that arrogance can be a dangerous thing, and Vicky was nothing if not persistent. I returned to my routine, but this time with an extra layer of vigilance. Every morning, I would log into the internal systems and check for unusual activity, unauthorized document edits, attempted access to archived server directories, misfired emails that might be used to manipulate perceptions of credit. Each tiny irregularity became a small victory when caught early. The micro-tension details I had cultivated during the battle became my armor. I even noticed she tried to sneak into meetings with new hires, subtly suggesting they acknowledge her leadership on projects I had pioneered. Every attempt was documented and archived. Jenna approached me one afternoon, clearly relieved. "I've never seen someone use corporate rules like this. It's impressive." I smiled faintly. "It's not just about impressing, it's about survival. Knowing the rules and knowing how to leverage them, that's how you win without a fight." And Vicky's attempts at influence continued to fail spectacularly. At a project review meeting, she tried to interrupt a demonstration of the AI bioinformatics system I had built. "I think we should highlight my role here," she started, her voice carrying that familiar smirk.
I calmly projected the amendment and internal compliance memos onto the screen. The room went silent. She froze, realizing everyone could see the legal record of her failed attempts to claim credit. Investors and senior staff exchanged glances. Vicky turned pale, cheeks flushed, and slumped back into her chair. It was a small, delicious moment, the kind you don't see in movies but live in quietly when justice is precise. She had tried to rewrite history, but she had done it in plain sight, and every document, every log, every time-stamped file had exposed her. The company implemented stricter compliance rules in the following weeks. Dual confirmation policies were enforced rigorously. Internal audits increased. Nepotism hires were scrutinized, and executives realized that even the CEO's family was not above accountability. For me, the payoff was more than financial. Yes, I had regained full credit and royalties for the $1.8 billion patent, but more importantly, I had reclaimed my reputation. Colleagues who had been unsure of my position began to show renewed respect. My name was back at the top of every report, my authorship indisputable. Sitting at my desk one evening, I reflected on what had happened. The thrill of seeing Vicky falter was satisfying, yes, but what I remembered most was the process, the careful observation, the patient accumulation of evidence, the knowledge that every small detail mattered. Justice wasn't a sudden eruption, it was a quiet, deliberate strategy. I thought about the countless people who suffer quietly under entitled managers or nepotistic colleagues. How often do they react with anger or fear or rash decisions that leave them vulnerable? In contrast, strategy, patience, and an intimate understanding of the rules can turn even the most powerful opponent into a powerless figure. I also realized something. Revenge isn't always about punishment. Sometimes it's about restoration, restoring truth, restoring fairness, and reclaiming what is yours by right. And when it's done strategically, it doesn't leave you hollow. It leaves you empowered. And now, I turn the question to you. Have you ever had a boss or colleague try to take credit for your work? Did you fight back, or did you let it slide? Share your stories in the comments below. Let's remind each other that knowing the rules and standing firm can sometimes be the most powerful form of revenge. If you want more stories of justice served in the corporate world, subscribe now. There's plenty more where this came from.